Boards. Games. Board games. Board games. We might be talking about the difference between video games and board games, but we're not gonna shout. Here is a person that I don't know super well, but are a lovely person, I'm sure. It is Manuel. And Manuel's been moving around geographically and has made a bunch of video games and board games, you see. And they've got so much that they can chat about. But as I said before, we're totally not going to shout. I mean, I say that every time, and then Kate says she's waiting for the moment when I do actually shout. But maybe that. But it's 10 a.m. UK time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. And episode 977, so it's just 3 weeks until my grand finale. And I'm very excited to have my, can I say good friend?
I think
I mean,
so.
Yeah, awesome.
We've
Well,
been talking about
this is the first time
each other
that
for
I
so long.
believe we've actually chatted in this kind of audio-video format, like the amazingness of the internet. But we have chatted on Twitter, on Discord, a little bit on other cohorts, and Mastodon is the new thing, which we'll see what happens to all of that. But Manuel, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And if people have never heard of you, I've got a little description on the bottom saying that you've been in the video games industry for over 12 years now. You started in the middle of 2010, and you've mainly focused on the video games because that's where the money is, frankly, and you're able to make a career and support yourself. But you've got a strong passion for board games, and so far as you've designed a few and successfully funded them on Kickstarter to some real critical acclaim.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I started in video games before I knew what I was doing. So I'm not sure if I'm anticipating one of your questions. Sorry.
No, that's totally fair. I'm just asking you to describe yourself. So
Oh, yeah.
isn't everyone kind of learning as they go along in these kinds of creative industries?
I'd say so, and I think that's the sane way to approach it. I think when people find or think that they know everything, that's it. They stopped. They're not. I think their creativity will run out if they are not open to learn new things. In my case, it's just I got the job way before I knew what I was doing, so I had to learn quickly, and I realized that board games were a really nice way to iterate very quickly. You can change the game as it's being played, and you don't need to worry about bugs so much if you're comparing the two. So I learned or found out that board games, I enjoy them even more than video games.
Lovely. I mean, I have a bit of experience with video games for those who are unaware. I originally went to university for what was meant to be called I can't remember the title of the course, but I was the second year ever to do it. So the course hadn't even been finished by the time I started. They had only been running it for 1 year. It was meant to be half design, half programming, and then they took out a lot of the design and brought in more programming. So I finished my first year, and then the second year I just got, this is just not for me. I mean, in the first year, I was able to do all the programming challenges by making something that I was kind of interested in. And
do you know I have exactly the same story, but with animation?
Oh, really? So it was meant to be half animation, half programming, and then they shifted it all towards
It was
programming.
a multimedia course, multimedia and animation, and it was the first year they were running it, so we were like the test subjects. And after that 1 year, I realized that I was learning so much more by myself that I didn't come back for the second.
I mean, I eventually went to go back to university later on, where I technically finished, I think it's called 3D animation and digital art, but I'm not good enough at 3D animation to do it professionally, no way. But it's at least taught me a little bit, and I got to experience lots of life modeling where, I mean, not as a model, but as one of the people doing the art. Although I wouldn't be totally adverse to that, but like, it really got me into that and really improved my illustration, I think. But did you ever finish your degree, or were you thinking, oh, this is it for me, I'm going to... move
No,
on into
I
the
didn't.
industry?
I felt bad because I was using my parents' money for that, and I was to study. I needed to live away from home, which made it more expensive.
Mm-mm.
So I just told them, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I will try to get a job. I want to pay for the next thing, whatever it is. So I got the first job that appeared, which was working as a mascot, handing out flyers on the
Wow.
beach or close
And
to the
what year
beach.
was this, if I may ask?
Oh, I'd say maybe 2008, 2007,
Okay.
2008, one of those.
Amazing. And so what was it that then led to your first job in the video games industry?
Oh, it's a long story, but the short version is I took the money from that job and I used it to go to a games event or games job fair in the UK, in London. It
Mm-mm.
was the first time I left the country by myself, first time I went to one of those events. But my main goal was to know what they expected from a junior. So I tried to talk to a lot of different studios, and I got really depressed because it seemed like people in the UK had so many more resources they could use, more schools that were tied to studios, that I thought I need to find a way to go there, study there, and kind of use those shortcuts if I can.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I tried that, and it didn't work. So I went back to Portugal, and hey, Denman, nice to see you. And for about a year, I was working on my portfolio for both games and visual effects, because those were the things I had studied in the end. Trying to get a job abroad, because in Portugal I couldn't really find a
Mm.
way to do it. And after a year trying, I gave up, and I was working in advertising uh,
Oh,
for
wow.
for 1 year. It was an advertising school that was also an advertising agency. So during the day, I
But then
was working in the agency.
advertising and marketing is such an I think that a lot of new designers really undervalue marketing, thinking of it as this big evil thing. Whereas I think that the best marketing is really just making people aware of something that exists. And really, it's about the communication. I mean, if I tell you the name of my next game is a game about auctioning cubes after winning an auction to become the auctioneer, that name is kind of marketing. That name
Yes,
is me working out what's the essence of this game, and I'm going to distill it into a sentence so that
it's a
when you
pitch.
walk by at a convention or when you see it on Boards Game Geek, you know exactly whether it's a game for you. If you hate auction games, it's not for you. If you hate the idea of being able to fail on the first turn, it's not for you because it is an unforgiving auction game. But it's about communicating that. And when you ask someone to sit down and play your game, first asking them, hey, what kind of games you like? And if it's a person who would maybe not like the game, kind of intercepting that and saying, you know what, if you don't want to play this, well, that's totally okay. I hope you have fun with everything else going on.
Mhm. In this case, it was more. I wasn't talking directly to any of the customers. It was advertising for signposts and visual advertising online
Mm-mm.
as well. But I agree with what you're saying. I
But
don't
even
think.
there, it's just on a bigger scale. I
Yeah.
mean, you still, well, it depends. I mean, sometimes some of it is completely, well, let's just associate this soft drink with this sexy, whether it's a person, and then boom, maybe that will inspire more people to buy it, which is kind of weird by association, and you don't really add any value to people's lives that way. But at its best, if we said, okay, like I don't know, like it feels like step one is making something that you can actually be proud of. And if you are lucky enough to be in that situation, where obviously I am a self publisher, so I'm incredibly lucky. That's everything I'm doing. Maya says, nope, don't think you are correct about that, Bez. Great. I love people disagreeing with me. And please tell me why I am totally wrong. But sorry, Manuel.
Yeah. Well, the rest is easy. So after working in advertising for about a year, a friend of mine that I had met because of trying to do my own games in my spare time told me about a job vacancy at a studio, at a local studio. And he said they have several people applying, but he didn't like any of the things he was seeing so far. So he encouraged me to, and I did. And I got the job. And then I never stopped working in games, even though I have jumped from studio to studio. That's where it started.
Mm-mm. And Maya says, even the connection with a sexy lady is personal. It's a connection to the audience. What do you think will drive them? And I understand that this is a human connection, but I guess what I was saying was that it isn't individual to the product. I mean, it's a very generic thing that could be used for any product. So it's not talking about really why you should buy this soft drink over the other one when it's just, hey, there's a sexy guy showing it off. It's more just that, hey, this company has the money to do that. And Maya does agree with me. We've come to some agreement. But
But part of the things, oh, sorry, yeah, I think it's a segue from this. Part of the things that kind of drove me away from advertising, because at the end of that year, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep doing that, are also really present in games when you're working for a studio, which is I was often tasked with defending and promoting things I didn't really believe or agree
mm,
with. And in studios, you don't really get to pick what you're working in next.
yeah, I can totally understand that difficulty. And when you're working for a big studio, of course, you've been tasked with doing this, and it's your livelihood. It's not as if you're in the movie freelance model where, hey, we're going to make a studio just for this one project, and you join this studio because you believe in this one project. And at the end of it, then we'll reevaluate it and decide whether to work again. I
Hmm.
mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you've worked for studios, it's always, okay, you are working here, this is your role, and you're going to work on whatever we tell you to. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I've heard of people that can choose. It hasn't happened to me yet. Once
Mhm.
I was asked if I wanted to be a part of a project, and I said no. But I've never really said yes to one, I think.
Sorry, I'm giggling at Maya's thing. I'm not the best person to trust. I don't know how to market myself, but many hugs. And I
Oh,
do get that. Sometimes it's difficult to do self promotion, like when it's you. And I think this is a challenging thing that we see so many people doing things that maybe don't have the sincerity behind it because people are forced to work on things that they don't agree with, that when it comes to marketing yourself. So I mean, you're someone who's had to market themselves if only for to go from job to job. And right off the bat, if so, let's say, do you think I could get a job in the video games industry if I said, you know what, I really want to work on some digital games? What would you tell me to expect? What would you warn me about? And how would you tell me to advertise myself?
oh, that's a lot of questions.
It
Well,
is.
first, I would say that yes, I think you have a very good chance, especially because you have finished projects, and that is something that most people don't have in their portfolio. A lot of students, a lot of enthusiasts like to start things, and that's easy. But actually finishing something is a very different skill, and most people don't have it, or at least don't show it. And you have a whole catalog of games you finished and marketed, successful Kickstarter campaigns. I don't think you'd have any trouble. Of course, there's technical knowledge that you would have to learn, but I think a lot of it can be done on the job, and it changes so much from studio to studio that even if you did know that for the first one, maybe you didn't know it for the second, and that's something that usually, well, depends on from studio to studio. Some will teach you, others will kind of expect you to learn by yourself.
And so then you've got the whole, okay, you've got to do all this homework in the evening, you've got to be reading these technical manuals for, I don't know what, and what platforms you use to make games for different consoles. I mean, I assume Unity isn't something that is used on a AAA studio.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah. There was a time where it seemed like most studios I was talking to were using Unity. I think that tide is shifting to Unreal, but there's still a lot of
Okay.
them using Unity. Actually, the one that I'm working on with right now is using Unity.
Okay, I had the mistaken impression that it was more of a kind of indie studio thing, where
No,
it's like,
there's a
"Hey, it's
cliche
not
that,
quite as
oh,
good as making an individual game for each different thing, but hey, this is a way to speed it up because then you can connect
oh,
it to all the
well,
different platforms."
I mean, you will always find elitist people that think that the right way to do it is to code the whole thing from scratch because then it gives you more control over everything. But then you're kind of reinventing the wheel every time. Do you want to do the most perfect, solid thing, or finish a game and put it in the market. Those engines are really valid and worth it, because once you know how to use them, you can also more easily work with a studio that uses them too. So I think they're great.
No, that seems like a very valid way to put it, because I mean it brings us back to the point of whether you're working for a video game studio. I mean, sure, I mean there's so much technological power, and I don't know, like all the RAM and all the gizmos and all the fancy things in the consoles and PCs these days, that this sounds bad to say, but you can get away with being inefficient. Do you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Like
yes,
back in the days of the Spectrum, where you had like a few K of memory, I don't think you could get away with doing anything other than coding it for that specific platform and eking every second that you can. But now
yes.
it's like, yeah, sure, if we do it the slapdash way, it'll take 0.01 seconds longer to render that frame. But frankly, who cares? Because people aren't going to notice.
I'd say that's also a difference in terms of design from video games to board games, because video games do a lot of stuff in the background, and board games kind of have to run on people's minds, so they cannot get too big or too complex, or some people won't won't support them.
Mm-mm. That's very true. And so Denman, am I pronouncing your name correctly, says, yeah, used Unity for 9 years in studios, but when I started finding new work in early 2022, almost all the studios I was talking with were using Unreal. One studio I talked to, a small indie studio, were rolling their own engine, which seemed crazy to me. But hey, to each their own. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, the reason that I talked about doing it in a slapdash manner is that, like, I'm going to admit, I mean, I don't know if I should talk about how my own things are bad in public, but, like the categorical letters that I just finished, I'm proud of them. But then, like the V, I look at that and be like, oh, I would like it to be a slightly more angular thing. The truth is that I didn't have enough space on the paper physically to make it as pointy as I would like. And if I did it all again, then because I was colouring in all the letters at the same time, I know that I used exactly the same inks and the pens were running out at the same time, so there's a
oh,
cohesion. So
mhm.
if I were to colour it in now again on its own, then it might look slightly different. So
I
I would have
see.
to do the entire thing again, but I'm not doing that because it's not worth it for like one letter. And,
Mhm.
it should still hopefully look really good. I think I'm actually quite happy with it. People have been complimenting me, which really warms my heart. And it's this whole thing of, at a certain point, you just need to say, well, this is the deadline. I need to do the best I can. And for you, it's like a studio saying, this is when we need to ship. For me, it's, what? I'm over to you with the Kickstarter, and I want to try and get it to me before UK Games Expo, so that if a Kickstarter backer is at UK Games Expo, I can give it to them then, and I can obviously, like if someone from Shuts Up and Sit Down is around, then I am going to give them a free copy of the game. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
because big audience makes a difference to your sales.
Oh,
Marketing.
there might be a reason for someone to make their own engine, which I think is really valid, which is maybe they're trying to do something that is just not possible on other tools. Something innovative, I think, can be worth doing, but scope is really important. I know people who have been working and reworking their own engines for over 15 years, maybe even more longer than that. And in the end, they don't release anything. And I think that's a shame, unfortunately. Shame is a strong word. It's just, I think they're really talented, but other people don't get to see it because nothing was released.
Well, let's take a tiny step back and get to our regular so-called opening sections with recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. What was the last couple of games you played? Have you played anything
Uh,
yesterday?
Board games, video games.
Anything. What did you play yesterday? What games did you play? Did you play with a spinning top? Did you play with a yo-yo? Did you play the piano? Let us know.
Yesterday, I played two games, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not counting the one I'm working on. I played Threes. mobile game that I think is really,
Oh,
really good.
that's the old one where you combine stuff and then it multiplies and then you slide the tiles together. That's a really
Oh,
interesting puzzle, right?
I guess you could describe it as old. I've been playing it since it came out. To me, it's really current, but I understand what you mean. That game I've had it in my pockets. To me, that's the only mobile game really. Uh, and when I'm getting stressed, I pick it up and I play it.
That's
I
lovely.
think it's excellent. And the other game that I played yesterday was, surprisingly, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which
Ooh,
came out over 20 years ago, or exactly 20 years ago, maybe. Uh, and I hadn't played it since then, and it's still fantastic. I still remember all the buttons. I remember all the maps. It's been really cozy to go back and play that again. The inertia, the sense of speed is really solid.
yeah, there's something lovely about that and having to maintain your tricks. And it's really interesting when you've got a game about something that you maybe couldn't do in the physical world, and then it allows you to do this. And then it's like Jet Set Radio,
Yes.
where you're kind of going around the city. It makes you think of cities and urban spaces in a slightly new way, which I think is a really powerful thing for a game. And I want to give a very quick shout out. Do you know Uni Rally or Uni Racers, as it's known in
Yes.
the USA? Which
Yes, I do.
when people don't know it, I describe it as a mix between Tony Hawk's, Sonic the Hedgehog, and a racing game. Because all the
Yes.
tricks that you do, if you've got a good variety of tricks, then you go faster, and you've got all the loops and the quick reactions of Sonic the Hedgehog, but it's just about getting to the end the fastest.
For those that don't
Um,
know, it's a unicycle race. It's the only video game I know about unicycles.
and I think that I heard that the reason that it's never going to come out again is because of Pixar not liking the fact that it was a little bit similar to one of their early animations,
Mm,
Unicycle, which, if that other people should fact check that. I'm not 100% sure on that, and I don't want to be
that's
bad
true. That's
mouthing.
really unfortunate.
Um, Maya says, Tony Hawk, I love that. I used to cover my score with a post to not get distracted by it. The soundtrack has immediately lodged its way into my head, and
Yes.
Maya's been playing Jenga with the kids. A lovely game. I mean, that's such a.
How do you pile up the kids in order to make the tower?
Love the joke. And oh, hello, Jess. And yes, Jess is listening from inside the flat.
Here?
Yes, no, here. And I was about to, Jess already allowed me to share this photo. So, talking about recent highlights, I was going to show this picture of my lovely friend Jess, and we walked around. I managed to finish all the background patterns for my new game, and we played a bunch of levels for Questable, which I am going to show you publicly. Like, we've got all these levels. As you can see, as it goes past level 21, we're not quite sure. We don't have all the levels quite worked out, but I'm really impressed with this game from Kirsten Lunde, which is a mission-based cooperative word game for the LDEC, and it just had so much potential. And so
Sounds
this
ambitious.
was, it's shaping up to be one of my favorite games, let alone my favorite game for the LDEC. So yeah. But Jeff says, I hear the stream first. I think the live stream is ahead of, Ooh, I'm not going to get into those claims. I don't think I am time traveling. But let's take a step back. Manuel, would you like to, talking about friends and getting games played and getting them made, do you have something that you would like to cite as a brilliant thing? What's a little thing which is brilliant?
This might sound cliche, almost coming from me, but I would say print and plays are brilliant. And it's been on my mind lately because I've had people discover Agent Decker recently, and it made me think of how it's the only one of my published board games that is still available, because it's a print and play, because it doesn't need to depend on a publisher and distribution and all of that. So it's a way to keep a game alive for much longer, if that's something that matters to you.
Yeah, and something really nice about you've got it on itch, and that's like an automated system where you just put it up and then people can buy it. Like I had print and play files on my website for like 50p during the pandemic, but then I started getting, I know this is going to sound terrible, it started getting kind of annoying because then I had to email them and each one was done manually. And then sometimes those people would be a bit, well, maybe they want to play it that same night and they don't want to wait for me. And that's not
Were you
great.
emailing? Oh, because you were not using itch.
Yes, because I was
Okay.
emailing them the files. And so I, at some point, would love to get on an automated system like itch, but I need to get a new bank account set up, I think, first for like a separate, but like that's a whole separate thing.
Itch is cool. I recommend it. When I started using it, they were not really doing board games. I actually sent them an email asking if I could do that, if that was okay, and they were open to it. And
I mean,
now it's
it's
more common.
amazing. It's just any digital files that you want to share. I mean, you could do images if you want. Hey, here's some images, and then you buy this collection of images for your own purpose. Like you could sell clip art on there. I could sell, hey, here's some fonts if you want to buy my fonts on there. I don't know, maybe someone would. Jess is not going down the time travel wormhole. Hello, Bearfish Pie, who says, I'm in work, so shall be lurking, but thank you very much for being here. Having a friend to stay is indeed brilliant. Manuel, in as much detail, let's actually move on to the questionably quick questions is the next section. It's not an sorry, that's the wrong banner, but questionable is brilliant. Questionably quick questions is the next section. It's not an interrogation. It's just a questionably quick questions section. So Jess asks, where are you based in as much detail as you're willing to share?
I am currently close to Lisbon, Portugal. I'm on the other side of the river because Lisbon is way too expensive right now.
Okay,
I'd love to
are
be
you in
there.
like a small town or are you basically in the suburbs?
It's still considered part of Lisbon, but it takes a while to get to the city center if you want to.
Jess asks, would you both like to jump out of the screen and come for a run with me? I mean,
sure.
Wow. I mean, for me, I'm kind of enjoying talking to you. So, like, Jess, if you want to go for a run, go for a run.
Oh, I agree. And it's just that I've been running lately, and today is a run day, so it was part of my plans anyway.
Jess thought you had a German accent and also says Questable is the best game ever. And
German accent? No, I lived there for 2 years. I don't think I picked up any of the accent. I picked up some of the words, but it's a tricky language to learn.
So my question is, so you've been in a few different places. What's your favorite place, and what is your favorite specific place in that area, if you know what I mean?
That's really hard. When
So
you say
firstly, what
specific
was your
place,
favorite place to live in?
well, I mean, I'm biased towards Portugal. I was born here and I've been away for 10 years, so I missed it and I'm glad to be back. But I have to say, I loved Ireland as well. It was the only one of those countries that I got back to. I mean, I'm not counting this one because I was born here, but because the people were so cool, so kind, and so nice, and so funny. So that's something that when I was looking for the next place to go, jump high on the list in terms of priority. It's got a beach. Yes, more than a few.
And you can go topless in Portugal, apparently.
Yeah.
But if I were going, did you ever venture to Northern Ireland?
Once. Once to Northern Ireland, we went to see the Giant's Causeway because we were curious and because I wanted to take a picture playing Hive on top of the Giant's Causeway.
I think I might have seen that. Did you share it in the Discord?
Yeah, very likely.
Oh, that was good.
And then
yeah, apparently no actual giants.
I went to Dundalk to give a talk that's on the border. And the idea behind that event is called Run for the Border is to unite the game development scenes in both Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland.
So is it mainly just your career opportunities that made you move from location to location?
Pretty much, it's almost 100%. I mean, the first time I moved out, it was because I felt like I had done what I could in the games industry in Portugal, and I couldn't advance in terms of a career, and I didn't want to be like typecast as someone who only does games of that type. And also, the salaries in Portugal are really, really low. So when I was offered a job outside of Portugal, it was 4 times my current wage. So I
Oh
couldn't
wow.
really say no. And it felt like even if that goes wrong, I would have still saved more than in a year in Portugal in that time, probably. So it's worth doing. So that's when I left to Ireland for the first time. That was it, and it did went horribly wrong very quickly. Uh, but I
Oh.
was already there, and my partner was living with me for the first time, so we had moved out together, uh, and we stuck around. We talked to local studios. In the other times, it was also because of jobs, because the games industry is really volatile, and sometimes after a project ends, you're let go because they kind of balloon up to complete the project, and when the project is done, they kind of kick a lot of people out.
Do you think that that should be formalized? I mean, it sounds like all the time there's some people who are told, hey, you're working on this now, you're working on this now. Conversely, there's some people who are told, okay, we finished the project, you're being let go. Should it be formalized like the film industry has basically done and say, you know what, we are making this one thing, and I mean, at least for AAA studios, we are making Red Dead Redemption 3, and once we've finished Red Dead Redemption 3, you'll all be let go, but then hopefully you'll find another job because other people will be hiring.
Yes, I think it should be formalized. I think the games industry is way behind in terms of unions, for example, and making sure that workers' rights are fair. And also, you would never be told you will be let go at the end of the project. It's just something that you fear, and it might happen or not. But it's such a blow on motivation that they won't tell you for the
But
most time.
I mean, but that could be a celebratory moment to kind of say, hey, we did this all together, and it's just an acknowledgement of the blimmin' reality. I'm trying not to swear because it
Mhm.
seems completely disingenuous. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, you know it firsthand, but I've
Yeah.
just heard the secondhand stories.
It's really frustrating, but in some cases it can be a nice opportunity to kind of do the thing you actually wanted to do in the first place, because you're not always allowed to choose, and that's an option. But it really depends on where you're based and if there is more industry there that you can jump to.
And says, apparently you want to go running, but I won't let you. Run free Manuel. Hashtag free Manuel. Denman says, it builds compliance to overwork without proper compensation. Employment for the next project is sometimes the bonus you are hoping for.
That's
And
very
that
true.
is, yeah, when it, but then that's going to be very much a me versus the rest of my team. If you know that, I'm plucking figures out of the air, but if you know that 80% of the team is going to be let go, then it you need to be not only good but in the top 20%. So then it becomes a case of, well, I need to show that I'm better than everyone else and I'm good stuff
It's
to
it's
get.
not a merit-based thing for the most part. I've seen it happen. I've been so that studio in Ireland that went wrong. They let go. They were about 30 people. They let go 27 of them, and it was a very weird process where they kind of explained their conditions for staying in. They explained what people needed to have done, and what and how they would qualify to stay in, and the things they would. It's stretching time. All right. So they kind of explained to people what they would need to be available to do in order to stick around, and I realized I didn't have the credentials they were hoping, and it just pit people against each other. Really, it kind of made people talk to each other about if they wanted to stay and to understand how many people were in the running. I thought it was a really negative way to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, that it does feel like then it's the bad case of marketing, and you're kind of saying, hey, um, Yeah. Let's move on. I would like to talk about something positive. Do you prefer books or podcasts?
Oh man, that's a really hard question because I love books in theory, but I find it hard to make time for them now that I'm working remotely. When I had a commute, I would always bring a book, uh, but now it's tricky because I can. It depends on what I'm doing, but there's a lot of tasks that I have to do where I could be listening to a podcast at the same time. So I go through a lot more podcasts and books currently,
Mm-mm-mm.
and there's
Me
some that I
too. I
really
mean,
like.
it's just such an easy thing to do when you're walking around, when you're cycling, commuting, or
Yeah.
sometimes in my case, when I'm drawing, I even have like some energetic music, but something kind of repetitive like Fatboy Slim, and
Hmm.
then something that, also some podcasts going on. The one that gives me the most energy is Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work. I don't know
Oh,
if you've listened to this, but
no,
more
I've heard about it a lot. I mean, for everyone, there's a lot of people who are just into game design, but not Magic, that still recommend it, even though it's from the main developer of Magic the
Oh,
Gathering at the moment.
absolutely. I would definitely recommend it. I would say that about 5% of the episodes, and bear in mind that Mark's gone past like 1,000 shows, so that's still a lot. But I would say 5% of them are absolutely invaluable for any designer. I mean, there's a whole series about things every game needs, and then the rules of games, and the psychographics, and of course the Jenny, Johnny, Timmy, Tammy, Spike psychographics, and the Melvin Vorfos type of personality is something that can apply to other people. And this kind of language that has been developed, I think, can allow us to speak in a more meaningful way about games.
I agree. I think game design is a language, and and you learn that vocabulary through playing other people's games and through hearing how
Mhm.
other people talk about games. Because in some cases, the same terms can mean very different things, even from studio to studio. But in terms of your questions, I have to say there's also a third option, which is audiobooks, which I
Mm.
really enjoyed for a while. But now I don't want to give Amazon any money if I can help it, so I stopped using Audible. But I was very I felt like I discovered like a cheat code. I was going through so many books so quickly on that. It was great. If I can find another good source, I should probably go back to it.
And what would you say is your favorite podcast or audiobook if you want to recommend something to the listeners of this show and to me?
Yeah. For podcasts, it's really personal, depends on your tastes, but the one that I've been enjoying the most recently, it's called Insert Credits. It's about video games,
Mm.
but it is not focused on the current hotness or game news. It's a very weirdly on topic for a podcast. They have regimented 6 minutes. They have 10 questions, 6 minutes to answer each, and then there's a buzzer at the end. It's formalized. There's a winner of every podcast. But I really like the people that are in it. It's changed a bit over the years, and I'm trying to catch up. So I am currently listening to last year. I listened to the last 12 years. It jumps, but
Yeah, I mean, I
it's a good
think
one.
that's a good show should be ideally relevant. And there was a time when I was listening to the Dice Tower, quite a few years after Dominion, where Tom Vassell was, quite correct, saying, "Oh, Dominion is this amazing game. I can see this changing the landscape of board gaming," and
Oh, it did.
it did. It totally did.
Yes. Changed
Tin
my
Man
life too.
says you might be able to rent, like, as in rent for free or check out
Yes.
stuff from the audiobooks from the library. So yeah.
I really want to try that. I have been so busy that I haven't. The library isn't even that far away from my house, but I haven't been there yet.
Mm-mm. Well,
Oh, and if you want me to recommend an audiobook, I really enjoyed Hyperion by Dan Simmons. I
Hyperion, I do not know that one. Is it non-fiction? Is it fiction? Tell us about it
It's
very
fiction,
quickly.
it's sci-fi, and it's really unique. I think the book is fascinating, but even the audiobook narration is good because they have a different actor for every character, for every one of the main characters at least, and they have very different lives. And I think it represents it well because sometimes in audiobooks I get confused when I go back to it and I don't know exactly who was talking, if it's just one actor. But on that one, because of the accents and all that, I would know exactly who it was. But Hyperion is sci-fi, and it is, how do I even describe it? I see people comparing it to Canterbury Tales, which I've never read, but in short, it's about a group of pilgrims that is going on a mission, and all of them have their own story. So the book ends up being a kind of a collection of their own personal stories and why they want to go to that place. The stories are all different in tone, in genre. I was always looking forward to the next one. Uh, it has a sequel, which I think is good, and then it has two more books, which are almost a different story, but they connect in some ways. I don't like them as much as the first ones, but the first I thought was fascinating.
And Jess asks what it's called, and is this the correct spelling,
It
Hyperion?
is, yes.
Okay, great. And as always, I want to remind people to thank you for commenting, asking questions. Obviously, the thumb like follow is always appreciated. But I like to wrap up my very questionably quick questions by what is your first memory of games? What is the first game you remember seeing or hearing about or playing?
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I remember some older. I don't know how board games fit into this because there was always something around, even though I wasn't aware of a hobby in board games. So it was probably a card game or something. There was a game that everyone had called the Donkey Game. It's a card game. It was popular here in Portugal. But in terms of video games, which I stick in my mind more for some reason, I I think it might have been one of those like Pipe Mania or Pipe Dreams games where you connect a pipe from A to B and you're trying to do it before the liquid runs out. I don't remember playing it, but I remember seeing it. It was a weird volleyball game.
I think there's something inherently satisfying about connecting stuff. And yeah, thanks for being here when you can. And
Thank you,
yes, I
Damon.
agree, work is important. But yeah, there's something inherently satisfying about being like, I've made that link. It has been finished. It's kind of like the same satisfaction in Tetris once you
Yeah.
complete a line, or in any jigsaw puzzle once you've got that final piece and it's like, now it's complete. The satisfaction of, I grew this, I completed it. It's like, I mean, and there's something nice about Carcassonne, don't get me wrong, where you're building up a giant map, but it doesn't quite have the and now it's done moment. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. You rarely end with a complete city. You're gonna end up with unfinished roads and castles. Yeah, I think something like King Domino gives you more of a this is done feeling because it gives you enough pieces to fill in your grid if you play it right.
Yeah, that I think you're right, and that might actually contribute to King Domino's success. And it's really interesting how you don't have to make this perfect 5x5 square, but you do get bonus points for it if you do. And I
Yeah, and
think
then
that's completely correct.
and you get to show it off to everyone else, and you get to see how they have assembled theirs.
But yeah, and the tiles, obviously, and yeah, I've heard actually a similar thing about my deck construction game. But what was the first moment? Because you've worked on so many games at this point. I mean, there's more than we can really get into. But what was the first moment when you're like, hey, you know what? This is something that I could work on. This is something I could do as a career.
Oh, that is so. I had given up trying to get into the games industry before. So as soon as I got to work in a studio and spend, I don't know, maybe a week there, when I when I knew everyone else's names, then I felt like I want to keep doing this. So that's one important moment. I guess that answers your question. After I
What
signed my contract to work there, so that would be a different studio because the first one didn't do contracts, and that's part of the reason I left. So that's the second one I worked at.
so we said, well, I wrote that we were going to compare video games and board games somewhat. And
Mhm.
so you've already talked about how video games can get much more complex. I mean, something like Sid Meier's Civilization 5, I don't know what it's on at this point.
6.
Okay, Civilization 6, that's one better, I assume. There's even in Civilization 2 or 3, which was the last one that I played, there's so much complexity, so much bookkeeping that the only reason you can really have that happen, especially with all of the enemy stuff and all of the AI stuff, is because the computer's taking care of it. There's no way to do that. I mean, the other big thing that you can't really do in a board game is you can't really have the same, well, real-time stuff is harder to do in a board game,
Yeah.
because in a board game the only way to do it either is everyone's racing and then people stop you at a certain point, or you've got a timer. That's basically it. So it's kind of okay, at a certain point it's who's done the most, but then during that activity. And then the third biggest difference to my mind is that in a board game you have to adjudicate the rules. If
Yes.
you can get a rule wrong, and this becomes really important in speed-based games, because in a speed game it's even more likely that we will make a mistake. So that's why maybe real-time stuff works better on video games. But yes, what do you think are the other things that video games have that makes them better in some ways than board games?
Hmm. I think video games can be more immersive. They can, through visuals, through audio, they can bring you into another space like board games can't, for the most part. I think they can surprise you more easily than board games because, like you said, you're not processing everything yourself. I sometimes describe board games as video games that run on people. And because it's doing stuff in the background, it can do unpredictable things that you were not expecting. So that also allows for different genres of games too. Yeah, all the bookkeeping is done automatically in video games. Yeah, but even platforms like Board Game Arena can do some of it for you, and it's interesting how it changes
I
some
mean, this
games.
is interesting because I kind of feel like Board Game Arena, yes, in theory, they are board games, but to me, that makes them feel more like video games because of that adjudication. And because I can, it's very, very easy to play any game on Board Game Arena. And I have played Anachrony, but it doesn't mean I know the rules. I've finished it, I clicked around, I did stuff, and I made some terrible choices. Same with A Feast for Odin.
Yes,
I was just trying to do the play literally everything on Board Game Arena thing,
I
and
think.
I
Yeah,
ended up
sorry.
with like a negative score. I suppose like it was something like negative 50, 100 points.
I think that's a really good point and a much better answer than mine, which is video games let you start playing before you learn all the rules. That can make them a lot more accessible in some cases.
That's really interesting. And Board Game Arena kind of has this in the tutorial mode, although the tutorials on Board Game Arena are interesting because they're not exactly interactive. I mean, you have to do exactly what's required in order to progress, but you are sort of going through the motions. Have you played Root on Steam?
Yes. I mean, I played it on iPad, which I think is the same thing,
Mhm.
the same app.
Because the tutorial on Steam for Root, I think, is possibly the best, board game tutorial in an app ever. I mean, I think it could be better. I think we could do even better, but it's like the best that we've managed to come up with as humans so far, in my opinion.
There's a few examples. I think Root. So Root, I learned it on as a board game first and as a video game second, and I wished I had played the video game first uh, because it's a lot more manageable. It gives you information in bite sizes and in chapters that make sense. I think Magic Arena is currently the best way to learn how to play Magic the Gathering as well. I guess if you don't have a friend that can, teach you the stuff in front
I
of
mean,
you.
they've talked about how humans feel embarrassed, and this is a key thing, that people don't want to feel embarrassed. I mean, for especially, I mean, I've kind of got to know over it at this point in my life, but for a 13-year-old, being embarrassed is like the worst thing in front of your peers, having to admit your own fragility, having to admit your own imperfections, having to say, yeah, you know what, I don't know this game, I don't understand it, and you feel potentially like an idiot. That's not fun for anyone. And so Magic the Gathering Arena allows you to play in this kind of non-judgmental way while the AI does all the things for you. And for Roots, yeah, I played on the video game, and then I consulted the Law of Roots, which is something you can download. And Maya says it's a win-lose kind of thing. It can take some of the fun out of it in certain situations, which I kind of agree. Sometimes it's really nice, like in photosynthesis. One thing that I don't like on the board game arena mode is that I can't just look at the chips and see what is the next sequence of numbers. I mean, sure, if I'm only the 50th best person on board game arena, maybe I don't care about it, exactly where it jumps. But like, this might sound quite egotistical, but on board game arena, I'm currently number 4, and I could even go up. I think that, and I'm currently undefeated in 2-player mode. So I'm looking forward to next season where we're voting to make it 2-player, which is quite exciting for me. And at a certain point, every point matters, and you want to access that by understanding all the rules. You kind of access a deeper level of strategic thinking. Would you agree?
Yes, even though I don't tend to get too competitive, I'd rather play more games and learn more than be the best at something. But sometimes a game gets to me, and I get really into it for a while. But it's hard to keep that going for me.
Yeah, I mean, if I might like retire from this season at least, because but anyway, that's by the by. So we've talked about why video games are better than board games, and then we started talking about why board games are better in other ways, like having all the knowledge, like in the real photosynthesis, which I was going to try and grab it, but it's under a bunch of other boxes, so I can't quite easily grab it, and I'd be knocking stuff over. But you can look at the chips, you can analyze this in the same way. Like, part of the joy of a game for me is taking out the cards and realizing, okay, this is the distribution, and this is what to expect, and this is maybe what the designer was thinking when they made this, when they put this together. And it's almost more of a communication between you and the designer, because there's none of this artifice in the way obscuring all the rules. Would you agree that that's something that arguably makes board games better?
Yeah, I agree. They don't really make it easy for you, for the most part, to check through it and look through and kind of decode all of that. So if you want to get really deep into a game, it can be tricky. But the upside is there are people who do this, and there are communities around exploring games and kind of unearthing things that were not clear at the first time people play them. And that's also why some games are popular years later, because people are still discovering things in them. So there's pros and cons.
I mean, yeah, we've already talked about the surprises in video games. Now I wanted to give board games some time to shine. It's like, hey, we've got
yes.
I absolutely agree that there's joy in the surprise. And it reminds me of, did you ever play Kingdom of Loathing?
No, I've heard a lot about Quest of Loathing from a friend, but not Kingdom of Loathing.
So Kingdom of Loathing is a browser-based, I don't know if it's still going on. My account shouldn't be deleted because I paid for a thing, but I don't know if I can remember my login details anymore, or even my account's name, to be honest.
Oh.
But it's this thing where it's kind of a parody of an RPG. And then there's puzzles, and sometimes the puzzles are jokes. And I'm going to give a minor spoiler. So if you don't want spoilers for a game that you might never play,
it's okay.
Please mute us for about let me see if I can pull up a spoiler banner. Spoilers. Yeah, I'll take that off when I finish doing the spoilers. Okay, so in this thing, like one puzzle which is really funny is you've got the abridged dictionary. Okay, there's a crafting system where you craft things together. So if you've got, I don't know, a cutlass and a parrot and a hat, maybe you put them together and you get a pirate. And then you've got a person who untinkers things, who separates things if you put them together. And then the abridged dictionary is something that you just get, so you've never made it. But then the puzzle there is that you take it to the untinkerer, who then separates it, so you get a bridge, and you also get a dictionary. And then it's like kind of slightly juvenile humor, but then you've got the orc chasm, and then so the bridge takes you over the orc chasm to get to the other side, and then there's lots of jokes that can have, innuendos going on, and but what I was really getting at, and I'll hide this, is that in all the combat, it's not really clear exactly what's going on and what the probabilities are. It never says, "Hey, this is what's going on," and some people their goal, because they finish the game and then you can start it again and try to sort of speed run it. And the game is all about, oh yeah, you can speed run it, or you could do the other thing where each time you play through, you can get more and more powerful, and you can see how you. And so, like, there's different types of speed runs. There's like one where you choose to start on hardcore mode with all the starting things, but extra difficulty. There's one where you can get like one extra skill for every time you've been through. So if you've been playing longer, every time it will get slightly easier. And people have almost, what's the words I'm looking for, reverse engineered the code behind it to say, there's this probability of here. So if you use your one action here, there's this probability of doing this. But if you use your one action here instead, then there's slightly more probability of getting the item that you need. And so, yeah, it's and it kind of feels, if you don't like that reverse engineering, then yeah, Boardgames at least presents you the information up front.
Yeah.
But is there any other good thing about Boardgames?
Of course, there's so much. I think just it's a great excuse to spend time with people. I get bored really easily. So if I am doing something, I'm not as anxious. So I can enjoy the people more if I know what we're there for. So unstructured activities make me really anxious. So yes. So I think it's a great excuse to spend time with people and actually get to look at them, because in video games you also get multiplayer, but most of it is online nowadays, and you don't interact as much. But in board games you can look up and around and actually talk to your friends.
Yeah, that's a really
Brings
good
people
point.
together.
I think there is a similar joy to have in, old style things like Bomberman, or like any split screen multiplayer. GoldenEye was a popular one, and Mario Kart, Mario Party. But nowadays it does feel like we have moved towards online multiplayer, which I love, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the fact that even my friend Kerry, who lives about an hour away, we can still, play a few turns of just one online.
Yes.
Which I'm going to call a video game, by the way, just for the purpose of this discussion, like, because it's the Board Game Arena implementation. I know that, but like, let's just go with it. But the actual physical analog board game then does allow people to come together, as you say. One other really good thing is something that I've been introduced to, this concept of non-discrete space, which is kind of saying you've got infinite granularity in what you can do. Imagine miniatures games where you can move forward 1 centimeter, or you could move forwards like the tiniest, there's literally infinite, well, at a certain point, I guess you can only move like 1 atom forward, but you know what I mean? It's basically infinite for our understanding. It's not like, hey, you've got one space on a board, and then this kind of infinite possibility space also comes in with games that are about social deduction, or games that are looking at some games about weird communication, like Pictionary. You could draw literally any line you want, and maybe me drawing this as opposed to this, which was a slightly bigger curve, maybe that informs your analysis of what I'm trying to draw for you.
Yes, that's true. Oh, and another thing that I think I should add about board games, and an advantage that I think is huge, is in board games, not everyone has to buy the game in order for everyone to play together. It's so much easier for me to share board games than video games.
Mm-mm. I mean, it's interesting because a couple of these things that we're talking about, they seemed to previously be part of video games. Like when we're talking about the days of the SNES or the Mega Drive, like one person would buy the cartridge and I would go over and I would be, okay, this is Street Fighter 2, or and then we'll play it together. Or, oh, this is ISS, and those aren't my favorite games for the record, but they are things that I played, and then I eventually bought them when all the games were in that brief moment when they were super cheap, before now they got super expensive because people who are selling them see them as this crazy nostalgic trip.
Yeah, people are speculating with physical board games, physical video games nowadays, and it's not a good time if you're a collector. But if you enjoy emulation, it's a really fantastic time because it's never been that easy to access.
But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that it feels sad that we've moved away from this. It's not hot seat mode, but from one thing, people playing
Couch
together.
co-op is the term. Well, it's if the game is co-op. But yes.
Are you familiar with Schizoid by Richard Garfield?
I vaguely have never played it. I've heard about it though.
So for those who don't know, are you familiar with Ikaruga?
Yes.
Schizoid is kind of vaguely like that. For those who don't know, in Schizoid there's 2 players, although you can play it one player using both controllers, obviously, which is very difficult. And you've got like a black ship and a white ship, and one destroys things of one color and is vulnerable to the other color, and vice versa. And you've got to kind of protect each other. So in one of the early levels, you kind of need to do this 1-2 punch and keep alternatively moving forwards. And it was a really good game until about 3/4 of the way through, where it's introduced too much RNG for my liking. I felt like, it was this very understandable game, and then all the enemies are, fairly simplistic in how they move, but it's very understandable, and there's a lot of emergent complexity. And then at a certain point, it's just, okay, here's some portals, you go in and you literally don't know where you're going to turn up. And it's like, that was a really weird design choice. And if I ever get to talk to Richard Garfield one day, fingers crossed, then I would be like, why did you do that in Schizoid? Who designed? Was that you or was that Scaff? Anyway, Maya wants to say a lot of multiplayer components are better with board games, but at the same time, if you impose the same location on the video game, then you're excluding couch multiplayers from your calculation. Couch multiplayers are also easy to share and can be played if only one player owns the game if you're at the same location, which is also why video games can be better again, by sharing multiplayer experience through different locations, if we exclude digital board games, of course. The line is becoming more and more blurry throughout time, which I would agree. I mean, back in the day, Reiner Knizia made a board game with, it's a deduction game. I can't remember the name of it. There's one tiny digital component. There's no screen. It works out who the thing was, and then you kind of put information into it.
I think the name is something like "Who Was It," but as one word.
It's German.
There's a good post-mortem on the design process for that game. That's worth checking out.
It is a really interesting thing, but of course, nowadays we've got more and more things like Return to Dark Tower and all the things that Lucky Duck are doing with Chronicles of Crime and like all of those things. But do you think it's problematic when people say, you know what, I don't want to play board games with any digital components. I don't want to play board games with a screen. Or do you think that's, yeah, fair enough, if that's your taste, you know what you like?
I might have a different point of view on this because I have worked on apps, and I think people get too heated up. The arguments get too intense about these things. I think it's up to personal preference. I don't want to dictate what games people can or can't do. So
Sure, like if
I'd
you're
encourage
telling
them to
other
try it.
people, don't play this game, or you've got to play this game. Frankly, for me, even those 10 games you must play before you die, I think those are really problematic to say you
Yeah.
must do this. I think it's just, hey, this is 10 games I love. Let's leave it at that. 10 games that have brought me joy. They brought me lots of joy. Maybe they don't bring you lots of joy. Maybe your tastes are different, in which case completely disregard what games brought me joy, because you know yourself better than I know you. Sorry if I'm getting...
No, I agree. But what I was going to say is digital things that live on app stores won't be there forever. And that worries me. So if I'm spending years working on something that I know is going to get discontinued after a probably short while, it discourages me from wanting to make more of those. So every time I see a board game with a mandatory digital part, I worry that it will become obsolete eventually. If they release a PC program that goes along with it, that has more chances of sticking around for longer. But if it's an app for a mobile or a tablet, it will disappear, as many others have done in the past, and as half of the games I worked on have disappeared too. And it feels like a bit of a waste. That said, I'm curious about them.
Sad.
There is a design space there to explore. So I think people should explore it, but with the caveat that that game will probably not live as long as the other ones you have, which might be okay for some people.
Drop Mix.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a copy of that, and now, like, in order to actually get it, you need to do sort of hacking, essentially, in order
that game has been discontinued twice. So Dropmix has turned into Fuser, which is a digital version of it with a really slick interface that was discontinued last year, and I don't think you can buy it anymore either.
And it is a shame. I mean, it's not to say that board games are necessarily going to survive forever. I mean, and they shouldn't. I mean, I think it's important that these things are made out of paper, so that if in 1,000 years, I would like to think that most of these things will have filtered into the soil, if you know what I mean. And let's have less plastic, so it doesn't remain for like 1,000 years.
Yes.
But at the same time, within my lifetime, if I've got, I mean, photosynthesis, that was made using recycled components, which is great. But even so, I'm fairly sure that if I'm going to sell it, to be honest, because I'm selling 99% of my games before I go to Thailand. But if I kept it, you know, it would probably remain until my elderly years, and that's an amazing thing. Sure, at a certain, but yeah, there's always the possibility that at a certain point, maybe one of the big trees might get eaten by a dog. I don't know.
Yeah, it could happen.
Anything could happen. But then the other great thing about board games is that they're really easy to fix. Like, if a video game isn't working for a board game, I could just, it's going to be ugly, but I could roll up a little bit of paper and say, you know what, that represents my big blue tree.
Yes.
And we don't have a big blue tree, so I made a little rubbish one out of paper, and it even tells a story about the game because it's uniquely ours. And there's a couple of other things I want to say before we go. How I wanted to talk about them being tactile. Obviously, that's something that you can't really get in real life. And, you know, also board games allow you to, what's the word I'm looking for? Change the rules if you really want. If you can hack them so much. Jess wants to wave at you very quickly.
Hey, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
We're going for a run now.
Oh, enjoy.
Me and you.
Oh, yes, let's go.
Yeah, jump out.
Yes.
Okay. Yay! See you, Bez.
Bye-bye.
See you. Enjoy.
So, yeah, I just checking to see if we had anything else we wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think we covered it, and we have run over my usual hour thing. So at this point, I've asked you lots of questions. Do you have a question to ask me and everyone watching as our question of the day? Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
Okay. I have recently been enjoying Orchards because it's a game that I can have on my desk, and it plays very quickly. Setup is instant. Are there any other tiny desk games you would suggest? Because this was a bit of a revelation for me. Is it too niche of a question?
No, I like that. So this is Orchard by a Mark something or
Mark Tuck.
yes, that's the one. I played this ages ago, and you're making a very small grid. You're overlapping cards, and then as you overlap things, the dice go up, and then you get more flowers. And it's okay. How can I overlap things in a good, meaningful way? And I want to obviously recommend one of my own LDEC games. Do you have one of the LDECs?
No, I should. I've been meaning to get it, but I haven't been going to events for
Well, I'm going
years
to
now.
bring it back into print, as you can maybe tell by the typography coming out. So it's going to be definitely back in print by the end of the year. And I might be running another Kickstarter, but from now on, I'm not doing any more Kickstarters unless I've got like all the files ready up front. Because after my 2020 Kickstarter, when I still maintain I would have gotten it ready, but then yeah, then there was a pandemic, and then there was Brexit, and my manufacturer said, "No, Brexit will never happen. Your governments can't be that idiotic. Don't worry." And yeah, it happened. And yeah, oh, I like it. Mark Tuck. I like
Yes.
that in a tuck box.
It is.
But yes, I was going to talk about Placeable, which is a 3x3 grid, which is a nice little thing which I enjoy sometimes. It's a solo game, and in theory, you win if you don't. You've got 3 cards remaining. So if you use more than 3 lives, then you've completely lost. But because it's quite an easy game, I feel like, hey, I only used 1 life. Brilliant. Or sometimes I feel like, yeah, oh, amazing. I didn't have to use any lives at all. I did so well. And because, honestly, if you like to lose more often than you win, it's not a great game for you. But otherwise, it's quite good.
But it sounds like you can set your own goals to adjust a bit of that difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of the LDEC is that there are so many different things. And one of the games that lots of people have really enjoyed is Usable, where one of the best wordsmithy people I know, who actually then designed the award-winning 2021 LDEC game, Joe Kelly, came up with Dwindle, which is a one-player game which you will always win, because it's really strange. I don't know any other game that you will always win if you keep playing it. There's a lot of video games, but you basically try to get rid of your cards, and it's really super easy to get to lower down just one number and then keep working on that until you get rid of it. But if you're trying to get a decent score, then you've got to obviously do better. And when I actually had COVID, because I've had it twice, unfortunately, the second time when I had it, and I was so exhausted and I couldn't play anything except for this one game, because I was like, yeah, I'll always win. I just play it, and then sure, a high score. It's like golf. A high score is bad. So maybe my normal score is 8, and then this time I got like 18 or something. But it's like, hey, it's fine. I've managed to achieve something. I've managed to win, and at least I didn't get 20. Oh, and Griddle is also a great desk game. That's by David Brain. And it's a 4x4. So if you've got room for 4x4, then that's also. Thank you very much for that recommendation. I very much appreciate it. I feel the love. But to other people out there, if you don't have to recommend one of my games, And I'm actually now, when I recommend one of my games, I also try to balance it out and think of a game by someone else that I should recommend. I don't play that many solo things, is the truth. Friday is
Well,
quite nice.
I'd say they don't need to be solo. I think I discovered this type of thing when I was still working at a studio, and me and the colleague next to me had a Hive game between us
I was
that we would
actually
take
about to
turns.
suggest Hive Pocket. If you like perfect information games, I'm going to suggest, have you heard of Pelago?
Yes, even though it has a different name here, I think. All right, I'm going to write it down. Pelago.
So if people don't know this, there are tiles and they are all identical. So they're hexagons split into the middle with two corners the opposite color. And like Carcassonne, you put them together and one color has to continue. And you put down two pieces on each turn. And if ever you've got one of your color that's completely surrounded, then you win. So you're trying to make a complete shape of your color. It's completely unlike any other perfect information combinatorial game that I know, and it's so gorgeous. But yes, and Maya says a lot of roll-in rights would fit. Kokoro really does take a small space.
True. But if you're solo, that's fine. If you're in an office and you're going to be rolling dice next to other people, that could get distracting.
Because of the noise.
Yes.
Yeah, I can sort of see
even
that.
on this table. Here's one from Orchard.
No dice in Kokoro.
Yes, that's true.
Deck of cards. And, something I'll also recommend while I'm on a kick about recommending two-player perfect information abstract strategy games, Martian Chess. So it's one of the games for the Looney Pyramids by Andrew Looney, and it uses a small board where the twist is, so you've the three sizes, one moves small diagonal spaces, one moves two orthogonally, one moves like a queen, any number, but you don't control a color, you control a zone. So anything on your side of the board you control, but you could literally just shove a piece onto the other side of the board and then take it with your next move, because anything that you take, so every capture is from your side to the other side, and you are always going to be giving them a piece as you go through. So it really changes the way you think about things.
That sounds cool. I think the Looney Pyramids sounds like a really neat system that I never was able to try it. And actually, one of my first memories of video games is a game by Andrew Looney. It was about pyramids, and it's a video game. You were one pyramid. You could get power-ups where you shoot things. I don't remember the name right now, but I'm sure you can find it. So there is a video game version of an Andrew Looney pyramid game.
Maya also wants to give a shout out to Welcome to Your Perfect Home.
Yes.
Pelago sounds a little like Tracks. I have played Tracks. I personally prefer Pelago because it feels more pleasing to be like, okay, now, I don't know, I find it more aesthetically pleasing, but that's just very idiosyncratic. But if you've played them both and you prefer Tracks, then, good on you. And I would, that's also a gorgeous, lovely, enjoyable game. Anyway, I feel like this has been a lovely chat. And Denman says, thanks for the chat. Thank you for being here. And I want to ask everyone at this point, over to you, what are you up to? You can share, Botsy, if you want to. Is there something that you want to share, something that you want to do, something that you need to do? Please share. I promise I care. Things that I want to do, well, I want to make sure I get out and eat, so, that would be nice. And, I'm just wanting to give myself a shout out that, yay, I've managed to get up and showered and everything today. But going to spend a couple of hours with my friend Jess, just wandering around the park and exploring the world while it is sunny. Then I'll be back here around 2 o'clock and I'll do a lot of illustration. Then I'll also have a bit of a playtest evening with some people who are coming over. So yeah, I'll possibly be working until the wee hours, going back to the illustration because I've got a lot of things to finish by UK Games Expo, which basically means that the illustration has to be done definitely by the end of this week in order to, have a couple of days for compositing and then time for printing, and then I take them over.
That's
Fingers
a full
crossed.
day.
So
Good
that
luck.
is what I'm up to. But what are you up to? What's some of your forthcoming highlights that you want to share? And anyone else watching?
Well, I don't know if I would go talking about my personal life or my work.
Both.
But okay, I've been working on a game called Demio Battles. It's a spin-off of Demio where players fight each other instead of being of helping each other, which is what the usual game is like. It's coming out later in the year. And the other thing is I'm tidying up this room. As you see, this is still a bit empty, and I'm in a maze of boxes. You can't see it, but maybe you can. I'm looking forward to getting all this sorted.
Yeah, I've got so much to do. If anyone wants to live in the London in a very nice location, I will let you live here in exchange for helping me out, saying goodbye to all of my games. You'll have to actually do, basically maybe 2 hours or 3 hours of maybe less fun work a week, but then just spend, a good amount of time playing games with me and helping me say goodbye to all my games and all the stuff, because, I've got too much stuff. But lots of love and enjoy your run, Jess. I hope you're having
no.
And to recap and wrap up before we finish up, we talked about learning as you go in creative industries. We talked about going straight out of university into the industry, saying, hey, I'm just going to get a job and then I'm going to go to London and find job because that's where people are. There's all sorts of stuff happening in London, which is why I feel quite fortunate to be here. And we talked about being told what to do, comparing the video game model to the film model. We talked about having to do things in a slightly slapdash way. And slapdash is over-egging it, maybe, but, it's about accepting the imperfections and accepting that things, sure, they could be better coded or whatever, but it's not worth it. We need to get these things finished because perfection is the enemy of being finished. We talked about games such as Threes and Questable and Jenga. We talked about letting folk go at the end of a project. We talked about audiobooks and Hyperion. It sounds like a cool sci-fi version of the Canterbury Tales is what Manuel said. We talked about insert credits. We talked about video games having the adjudication coming from the game itself, which then goes on to allow you to have the complexity, some real-time elements, and a level of surprise that is difficult to replicate in board games, although obviously you've got that with envelopes potentially. And then we talked about board games bringing people physically together, which, to be fair, happens with couch multiplayer, about having the upfront rule, but then the real distinction is the infinite possibility space in non-discrete games, as Glenn says, and the tactility. Like, there's no other game where you can, in a video game, pushing a button hard is not the same as slamming a tile down on the table and then looking at your opponent's like...
You do get a bit of that in VR, though.
Yeah, that's true. But there's something magical about being together and being like... Although
yes.
Yeah, and it's also because you don't have to face the screen. Like even with Bomberman, you might hear people laughing gleefully after they explode, but you don't get to see their face necessarily. Whereas in a board game, it's just like that motion is all you need to do to go from the game to their face. Whereas in a video game, it's game, face. It's more heads turning, so it's more difficult. Maya says, I relate to unpacking, although I have never moved. I did redecorate, and boxing and unboxing stuff is both bothersome and satisfying at the same time. And VR still lacks tactility. you feel something is missing. Yes, I do agree with that. And we
Maya, do you
talked.
mean unpacking the activity or unpacking the video game?
Oh no, that's two separate things, because I was talking about my difficulty of unpacking and
Oh, because I'd recommend the video game unpacking. I think it's fascinating what the storytelling they managed to get out of such a simple mechanic.
Wow, I have not played that. So should I put it on? Should I write it down?
Well, if you're going through that yourself in real life, it might feel a bit redundant because you are
Okay.
moving from house to
I'm
house.
scribbling it out now.
but I think it's really good.
Yeah, I've got too much stuff to do with my ensuing move, and like I moved to this apartment and I still haven't unpacked, and now I have to get rid of everything and say goodbye to stuff because I'm going to be moving at the end of this year, and actually I just got contacted by the landlord to. Yeah, anyway, Maya's not played it either.
As someone who has lived in 15 places in the last 10 years, I understand.
I've got too much stuff. I've just accumulated stuff. In my move, I had like a big lorry, but yes, we talked about Root, we talked about games to recommend, we talked about the Deck, we talked about Pelago and Hive and Roland Rights, and it has been a lovely conversation. I'm glad that we finally got to, meet in this manner, and during early 2024, I am planning a European tour. So a very short one. So like I assume that you are not able to come to my leaving party, which is in Milton Keynes, because it's a bit out of your way.
I imagine so. I haven't been traveling except for the relocation, really.
But after, my plan is to go to Thailand, stay there for maybe 4 or 5 months, and then have a short 2 months tour of Europe before UK Games Expo next year, and then go back for about 9 months, and then come back for 2 months or so. But yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
That's it. So it's going to be mainly there, but maybe see you at some point in the future. Same with you, Maya. It would be lovely to see you in real life at some point if the opportunity arises. But in any case, share, spread the word. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to everyone who's been. I see there's a lot of people lurking and not saying anything, but thank you for sharing, making us part of your morning or evening or whatever it is for you. And for everyone who's been chatting along, thank you very much. And most importantly, thank you, Manuel, for jumping in.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been so long. It's actually funny how in the beginning I had seen you at an event and I didn't connect it to the person that I was talking to on Twitter until later. You're hard to miss at an event. There's a lot of red.
Yeah. You might be a reason to come to Croatia. I wouldn't be going through Croatia, but we can work out something. Thank you for watching, Salty Horse. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. And now's the time for me to say goodbye. If you want to check me out, I am in all of these places. If you want to check Manuel out, where do you like to be found?
I am not using Twitter anymore. That's where I would point people to. But basically, if you search for Games by Manuel, you can find me. You can find the site. Yes, those are good. I have been using Mastodon instead of Twitter, but you can find the link to that on my site.
Yes, and I'm not logged in, but you can see all sorts of pictures and stuff from Manuel, and yeah.
That's a friend. Carlos Letuga, he's a game designer, might be watching right now. I don't know. He's the one I was playing Hive with when I was working at that studio.
Oh. So good luck finding them. Yeah, that's, as we said, we talked about print and play, the ability for people to still find stuff after the fact. Anyway, check out stuffbybez.com/streams. Tomorrow I am chatting to Jess Medringham. Thursday, Ben Downton about marketing. Saturday I'm doing a playthrough with Josie, and then Sunday will be a live show from a convention where I will be just showing it for like a 10-minute tour before I get back to demoing games to people. Because I do a daily stream even when I'm at conventions. That's how I roll. And then Monday next week is Phil Walker Harding. I'm not sure what we'll do. We might play a game of Sushi Go together, and I'll just give lots of compliments because I really love that game. And we'll talk about some of the design decisions that went into that maybe. But if you've got any questions, and then it's all on the thing, and then a Dicey debrief, because I like to have a debrief of stuff that I go to. But yes, it's been lovely chatting. And do you have anything left to say?
Oh, I wasn't preparing for this. I guess not.
Perfect. Well, we have covered everything. Lots of love, and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, everyone.